It was supposed to be an ordinary day, just like any other at Ocean World. The sea breeze carried the excitement of a routine show, and the audience was packed in anticipation for a breathtaking performance. Trainers and orcas side by side, performing tricks and forming a bond that millions of people could only dream of. But this time, things would be different. As the performance unfolded, the unthinkable happened. It wasn't just a slip-up or a mistake. It was an unimaginable tragedy. Maris Ellington, a respected orca trainer, would not leave the stage alive. What was meant to be a flawless interaction between human and animal ended in catastrophe, forever changing the lives of those involved and raising serious questions about the ethics of orca captivity. This is the story of that tragic event, a story that not only altered the course of marine entertainment, but also left a deep scar on the public's perception of captivity itself. To understand the magnitude of this tragedy, we must first understand who Maris Ellington was. Born with a natural affinity for the ocean, Maris's fascination with marine life began at an early age. While other children might have been collecting seashells or building sandcastles, Maris was lost in books about whales and dolphins, studying their behaviors, sounds, and migration patterns. At 10 years old, she could imitate the calls of dolphins so well that people around her believed she was communicating with them. Her passion didn't stop there. By the time she was 16, Maris had already begun volunteering at her local aquarium, assisting in any way she could, from feeding the animals to cleaning their tanks. She had the drive, the curiosity, and an innate understanding of these magnificent creatures, traits that would shape her future career. Her academic achievements followed suit. She earned a degree in marine biology, specializing in marine mammal behavior. But her real talent lay not in her academic credentials, but in the bond she forged with the orcas. By her early 20s, she was recruited by Ocean World, a renowned marine park, where she would make her name as one of the most talented, compassionate, and respected orca trainers in the world. Maris had an uncanny way with the animals. She understood them in ways no one else did. Orcas, massive and powerful, known for their intelligence and complexity, seemed to respond to her in ways that baffled even seasoned trainers. They trusted her, and that trust was what made her performances so special. She wasn't just a trainer, she was a bridge between two worlds, the world of humans and the world of these ocean giants. In the world of marine parks, Maris was a superstar. Her performances were the highlight of Ocean World's shows, and she quickly became a role model for aspiring trainers. It wasn't just her technical skill that made her stand out, though. It was her philosophy on orca training. Maris didn't believe in dominance or control. Instead, she believed in mutual respect and trust. Her philosophy was clear. We don't train orcas to perform for us. We work together. Her belief in this symbiotic relationship was more than just words. She didn't see the orcas as tools to be exploited for entertainment. She viewed them as intelligent, emotional beings with their own needs and desires. The other trainers often looked to her for guidance, and the visitors could see it too. There was something magical about the way she worked with the orcas. They weren't just performing tricks, they were sharing a bond with Maris, a bond built on understanding and respect. However, this belief in harmony was not without its challenges. While Maris's approach was praised by those who saw her interact with the animals, the industry at large often overlooked the inherent risks that came with working in such close proximity to these massive creatures. Maris, ever the optimist, believed that her bond with the orcas would protect her. She trusted them, and in return, they trusted her. But sometimes, trust alone isn't enough, especially when the animals involved are forced to live in captivity, separated from their natural habitats, confined to small tanks that can't replicate the vast oceans they once roamed freely. Ocean World was one of the most famous marine parks in the world, drawing millions of visitors every year to witness the beauty and grace of marine mammals. At the heart of the park's success was its orca show, where trainers like Maris worked side by side with these massive creatures in stunning displays of acrobatics and synchronization. The park presented a picture of harmony between humans and animals, a beautiful world where humans could connect with the wild. But beneath the surface, things weren't so perfect. Ocean World's Orca program was built on a history of capturing wild orcas, a practice that was legal in the early days, but soon came under intense scrutiny. Orcas are highly intelligent and social animals, capable of forming tight-knit family units that travel vast distances across the ocean. The small tanks at Ocean World, no matter how well designed, could never replicate the freedom these creatures had once known. As the years went by, the pressure on the animals and their trainers only grew. The demand for more complex performances led to longer and more exhausting training sessions. Orcas, who were already under intense psychological strain, began to show signs of stress. Some became listless, others aggressive, and despite Maris's best efforts to create a safe and healthy environment, the toll of captivity was becoming impossible to ignore. Cairo, a massive 11,000-pound orca, was one of Ocean World's most prized animals. He was a seasoned performer, but he had a dark history. Having spent more than 2 decades in captivity, Cairo had become increasingly unpredictable. Despite being one of the most famous orcas in the world, Cairo had shown signs of aggression in the past, and many trainers, including Maris, had noticed subtle changes in his behavior. But Cairo was a star, and his performances were essential to the park's revenue. In the weeks leading up to the tragic incident, Maris began to notice changes in Cairo's behavior that she couldn't ignore. The orca, once responsive and cooperative, started acting out. He would frequently refuse commands, lingering at the surface in a way that felt more like protest than performance. His usual playful nature had turned to frustration, and he exhibited signs of agitation that Maris had never seen before. One of the most troubling behaviors was Cairo's tendency to float motionless at the surface for long periods. Orcas are naturally active creatures, traveling miles each day in the wild, and such lethargy in captivity could be a warning sign of stress or even depression. Trainers, including Maris, were concerned but continued with their regular routines, hoping the changes were temporary. After all, Cairo had been a performer for years, and Maris trusted him. The bond they shared was strong. Surely it would get them through this rough patch. But as the day of the fateful performance drew near, Cairo's behavior continued to deteriorate. His once enthusiastic jumps and synchronized movements became sluggish. His interactions with the other orcas and the trainers were no longer as fluid. Cairo was no longer the well-behaved showpiece that he once was. Maris was worried, but she chose to go on with the performance, hoping that the connection she shared with the orca would be enough to navigate through his discomfort. It was a beautiful morning when Maris and Cairo took their positions for the show. The audience cheered as the trainers lined up, ready for another flawless performance. Maris, standing confidently on the submerged platform, extended her arm toward Cairo, signaling for him to swim alongside her in the graceful side swim move that had become a signature of her acts. The crowd watched in awe, completely unaware of the tension building below the surface. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Cairo, uncharacteristically slow to respond, suddenly lunged. His massive jaws clamped around Maris's arm. What should have been a graceful side swim became a desperate struggle for survival. The audience thought it was part of the show, unaware that this was not a carefully choreographed move, but a horrifying attack. Maris, caught off guard and unable to break free, was pulled underwater. The panic set in as the other trainers scrambled to intervene, but Cairo was strong, and his grip on Maris didn't loosen. The water churned violently, and the trainers could only watch helplessly as Maris was dragged deeper. Minutes felt like hours. By the time the emergency dive team was able to enter the water, it was too late. Maris was unconscious, her arm severely injured and her breathing compromised. Despite the best efforts of the medical team, Maris Ellington was pronounced dead at 12:23 p.m., just 37 minutes after the attack. The news of Maris Ellington's death hit like a tidal wave. Ocean World immediately shut down its operations, and the world watched in shock. The park released a brief statement expressing their condolences, but it was clear that the tragedy was much larger than just one incident. Maris was beloved by her colleagues, and her death left a hole in the marine park community. The public response was immediate and intense. News outlets across the world began reporting on the incident, with many questioning the safety of orca captivity and the ethics of such performances. Social media exploded with outrage. People demanded answers, and animal rights groups called for the immediate release of all captive orcas. The public wasn't just mourning the loss of Maris, they were confronting the reality of captivity and the toll it took on the animals involved. In the wake of the tragedy, an investigation was launched. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, took control of the inquiry, examining the events leading up to Maris's death. The findings were disturbing. Cairo, it turned out, had been under increasing stress for weeks, a fact that had been overlooked by trainers and park officials alike. His aggression was not a sudden change, but a culmination of years spent in captivity. An autopsy confirmed the extent of Maris's injuries: blunt force trauma, broken bones, and internal bleeding. The cause of death was ruled as drowning, but the trauma to her body was severe. The investigation revealed that Cairo's behavior had been escalating for some time, with warning signs ignored or dismissed. In the wake of Maris Ellington's tragic death, a firestorm of debate erupted. The incident was not just a personal loss, but a lightning rod for a much broader issue: the ethics of keeping orcas and other marine mammals In captivity, the question at the heart of the debate was simple yet profound. Can we justify the captivity of highly intelligent and emotionally complex creatures for the sake of entertainment? The debate was no longer a theoretical discussion. It became an urgent conversation about the welfare of these animals and whether orcas should ever be subjected to the stress of confined tanks and performance schedules. Experts in marine biology, animal welfare, and psychology began to speak out more vocally. They shared that orcas, like humans, are social animals with intricate family bonds, and captivity stifles their natural behaviors. In the wild, these animals travel up to 100 miles a day, hunting, socializing, and living in dynamic family groups. Captivity, with its small tanks and rigid routines, could never replicate this freedom, and the stress this caused was increasingly being linked to aggressive behavior, psychological distress, and in some cases, tragic incidents like Maris's death. Meanwhile, the marine park industry attempted to defend its practices, pointing to the welfare measures they had in place and the educational value of their shows. They argued that the animals were well cared for, and the shows educated the public about marine life, fostering empathy and awareness. But critics pushed back hard. Animal rights organizations ramped up their calls for stricter regulations, even for a full ban on orca captivity, demanding that marine parks move away from using these majestic creatures for entertainment. The conversation shifted from just one tragic event to the broader implications of keeping wild animals in controlled environments for profit. For many, Maris's death had become a turning point. It wasn't just an isolated accident, but a glaring sign of the inherent risks involved in captivity. As more facts emerged about the stresses faced by the orcas, particularly Cairo, whose aggressive behavior had escalated over time, the narrative began to change. Public opinion, once supportive of marine parks, started to sway toward the idea that perhaps it was time for a significant change. Despite the sorrow surrounding her death, Maris Ellington's legacy was far from one of despair. Her family, along with former colleagues and animal rights advocates, were determined to honor her memory by continuing the work she had started and expanding upon it. In the months following the tragedy, the Maris Ellington Foundation was established with the goal of educating the public on the dangers of marine mammal captivity and advocating for the release of captive orcas back into the wild whenever possible. The foundation also worked tirelessly to support the rehabilitation of orcas that had been kept in captivity for years. Experts on the foundation's advisory board began to push for the creation of sanctuaries, large, natural environments where captive orcas could experience freedom, where they could swim in larger, more natural spaces and interact with other orcas outside of human control. These sanctuaries were positioned as a middle ground between the cruelty of captivity and the challenges of reintroducing animals that had lived in confined spaces for years. The idea wasn't to force these animals back into the wild, but to provide them a safe space that would allow them to experience something closer to their natural lives. Meanwhile, Ocean World, the marine park where Maris had worked, made significant changes to its operations. In a somber acknowledgement of the tragedy, the park suspended its orca performances indefinitely. The board announced that they would no longer breed or capture wild orcas, and that they would review their treatment and training protocols. A new focus on animal welfare emerged, with several reforms made to enhance the care and conditions of all the animals in their care. Though these efforts were seen as positive steps forward, they were far from a resolution to the problem. The debate around orca captivity was far from over. Maris's death had sparked an undeniable shift in public opinion, and the movement for change gained momentum. Activists from around the world began rallying together to create global pressure on governments and corporations alike, demanding policies that protected the welfare of marine mammals and prohibited their use in entertainment shows. Maris had always believed in the power of education and empathy, and even in her absence, her voice continued to resonate. Her work inspired new conversations and made it clear that there were better, more ethical ways to interact with these magnificent creatures, ways that prioritized their well-being over profit. Maris Ellington's tragic death was a stark reminder of the deep ethical questions surrounding captivity, but it also became the catalyst for meaningful change. The legacy she left behind was not one of bitterness or anger, but of love, advocacy, and a drive to change the way we view and treat the animals we share the planet with. Her story forced society to confront uncomfortable truths, igniting a conversation about what it truly means to care for wild animals in captivity. Her work and the foundation she inspired continue to impact the way people think about orcas and other marine mammals. The movement she helped ignite is still gaining ground, advocating for sanctuaries, better care standards, and ultimately, the end of Orca captivity in entertainment. The road ahead is long, but the ripples of Maris's life are still felt, urging us to reconsider how we interact with the natural world. In the years that followed, changes were made in other marine parks. Some institutions stopped breeding orcas altogether, and others began to shift toward a model of conservation rather than entertainment. Maris's call for change reverberated across the globe, reminding us that we are stewards of the creatures we share the earth with, not masters. The impact of her work will never be forgotten. She believed that animals could be our teachers, showing us the beauty of the wild and the importance of protecting it. Her legacy lives on in the hearts of those who continue to fight for the freedom of orcas and all animals held in captivity. The lasting impact of her life and death is a call to action, urging us to build a future where animals no longer have to perform for our entertainment, but instead are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. Maris Ellington's death was a tragedy, but in many ways, it sparked a movement, one that is still growing and one that will continue to honor her spirit for years to come.